Welcome to the lecture series on Heinlein's Rules. My name is Dean Wesley Smith. I am the author of well over 100 novels sold traditionally through New York and hundreds of short stories in magazines and books over the years, as well as I've been an editor off and on for years, and I have done quite a bit of other things. I've been basically working and making a living at writing fiction for 2.5, 3 decades. A long time. I am sitting in my office at WMG Publishing Incorporated. I have an office here because I'm one of the owners of the company, and basically this is where we hold workshops. And I have, because I inherited a large estate a year or so ago that was a book dealer's estate, we needed room to store it, so I just rented this gigantic place. And it's full of my collectibles. Behind me right there is a bunch of marbles, and over on that side are a whole bunch of collectible paperbacks and the whole room around and everything else. I'm not going to give a tour like we do in the other online workshops, but this is my office. I come up here and play. WMG Publishing is a growing company, but it's got like 4 or 5 employees now and everything else. And Ella Distribution, the new distribution company, is right down below me here. Downstairs, another company I'm partial owner of. But I'm sitting up here. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. The traffic on Highway 101 is pretty light, so you won't have to put up with too much of that. So let's get started here on Heinlein's Rules. This is going to be a whole series, quite a number of them. I'm going to go through them one at a time, and as to why they're important, why they work, what you can do to vary them if you want, and how you need to be cautious on it. But first off, I need to give you some introduction here. Back in 1947, Robert Heinlein was asked to do an article on the science of science fiction writing. And it was called, for a little book out of Fantasy Press called Of Worlds Beyond. Now, I have 3 or 4 copies of this, even though it's quite collectible. In this thing, he did this very forgettable article. I mean, incredibly forgettable article. And then right at the end, he said, to heck with all that. I'll give you some information here that's much more valuable to any science fiction writer. And now realize in this thing, it had Laurie Arthur Eschbach was the editor of this in 1947, and he asked Jack Williamson, A.E. Van Val, L. Sprague de Camp, Edward E. Doc Smith, John W. Campbell Jr., and Robert Heinlein to contribute articles to this called The Science of Science Fiction Writing. And Heinlein did this one that was very kind of opaque and, to be honest with you, deadly dull. And then he got to where he just said, to heck with it, I'm going to tell you exactly what it's like. And I will put this up on the screen here so that you can read his exact words. And in fact, it's probably over me right now. I will do that later. And what he did was he said, let me give you some information that is really, these are my business rules. And he laid out these 5 rules. And they are unbelievable in how, let me simply say, difficult, nearly impossible to follow. They look incredibly simple. They look incredibly simple. And every professional writer I know who has said, I'm going to follow those rules, has gone on to be a professional writer if they stuck with it, me included. And that's what I wanted to do in this first video, and I'll get into explaining more about these rules, and we'll go over them one by one and why they are so incredibly important and where they take out people one at a time. Writers who want to be professionals and just don't make it. You can always spot where they don't make it in one of these rules. But for me, I started writing back in the early mid-70s. And I was a poet. I had sold a couple little short stories to, that were just my first attempts to a semi-pro zine that happened to have Asimov's and Manly Wade Wellman and a whole bunch of other people in it. I thought it was way cool. My little 1,000-word short stories. And I bought into every myth there was in fiction writing. Every one of them. Boy, I was hook, line, and sinker down into the myths. I was rewriting everything to death. I was writing slow because I thought that was important. I would, oh man, you name it. If it came out of an English department, I bought into it. And I didn't even go to English departments much. I mean, I went to some classes there, but I was, when I went back to college after I was 25, I got a degree in architecture and then went on to law school. and went to 3 years of law school. So I don't, all during that period though, I was buying into every writing myth. And so I managed to produce from 1975 to 1982 two short stories a year. Now, I personally thought those short stories were the best things that were ever written. I don't know. I thought the editors were too stupid for words because they wouldn't buy my wonderful writing. And because I had rewritten them to death. Well, what I had done is exactly what Heinlein said not to do, and to be a professional writer. Somewhere about fall of 1981, I stumbled across Heinlein's rules and went and found Of Worlds Beyond and read the entire article and read Heinlein's rules. And then I read a book by Ray Bradbury, who was, of course, following Heinlein's rules. And I had been a fan, and I had not met him yet. He's since become a friend, but I had not met him yet, Harlan Ellison, who was following Heinlein's rules. And then I started reading more about Robert Silverberg and Mike Resnick and on and on and on. And they were all following Heinlein's rules, even though they weren't claiming they were, they were. And I just kind of went, well, okay, there's obviously something here, and Robert Heinlein clearly knew what he was talking about. And this was 1982, January 1st, and I said, okay, that's it, I'm following Heinlein's rules. And I started following Heinlein's rules and putting out a short story a week and just following the rules, putting it out on the market and everything else. By the spring of 1983, I started selling stories professionally. And at that point on, I just never looked back. I wrote 45 short stories that first year. I wrote 40-some the second year. I started writing novels and more short stories and sold my first novel in 1987, 5 years later, following Heinlein's rules. Everywhere. Every time I fell off of Heinlein's rules, I stopped. I stopped my career cold. And it usually would take me a month or two, and I go, what am I doing? And I would climb right back on, and off I would go again. These rules are frighteningly difficult to follow because they go dead into the face of what English teachers teach us, right into the face of it. And that's because English teachers teach other teachers. They teach you to become a teacher. Nothing wrong with that. It's a great career track. But if you want to be a creative writer, you have to tap into the creative side, not the critical side of your brain, but the creative side of your brain, and that's what Heinlein's rules do. Also, what Heinlein's rules do, and I'm going to talk a lot about this in different places, is they teach you that one thing that writers think is just a four-letter word. It's not, but they think it is. Practice. Writers don't think they ever need to practice. We are the only art form on the planet that thinks we don't need to practice. You pick up a violin, and then you think you can walk on the stage at Carnegie Hall in front of 30,000 people without any practice. But yet you write your first short story, and you mail it off to Asimov's, and then you're mad that they don't buy it. They don't let you on the stage in front of 50 or 60,000 people that read Asimov's. Well, why don't they let you on the stage? Because you don't belong on the stage yet. You haven't practiced enough. You don't have your art down enough. You don't even know what you're not doing. And I was no exception to this rule. None. Zero. I mean, from 1975 to 1982, I thought my stories were the best things that ever lived. Now, I had a house fire in 1985, and I lost every story that I wrote from 1975 to 1985, except for the ones that happened to be in print or happened to be out on the market. I consider that, I don't consider a house fire a lucky break, but I consider the fact that I don't get to go back and look at those sort of a lucky break, because I probably would just be appalled at how egotistical I was from 75 to 82 without ever doing any practice, rewriting things into pablum and everything else. So we're going to work on Heinlein's rules here. That's my personal story about him. I believe in him. I got 100 and some novels published through New York and hundreds of short stories, and I've been making a living at this. Believe me or not, here we go. Let's get talking about Heinlein's rules. Good luck and hang on, because this is going to really hurt at times.